All right, welcome back to another episode here with the Young Startup. Today we have actually a local friend. I know Taylor, which is our guest today, back from high school. Actually, he's done some incredible things in his life as an entrepreneur, has been through some ups and downs, but he's working on a really cool startup right now, current state. And I think it's going to change the world in many different ways for anybody that's into sports. So first and foremost, Taylor, appreciate you hopping on the podcast here today. If you want to do just a quick little welcome or an introduction to yourself, who you are, how you got started in entrepreneurship, what you do current state, and we'll dive into some questions after that.
Yeah, no, thanks first of all for having me on the podcast. I'm happy to be here. And so for me, entrepreneurship sort of started, at least the idea of it started when I was a kid. So back when I was probably like 7 or 8, I would notice my parents always complaining when they came home about their 9 to 5 jobs and just were never happy with it. And that kind of stuck with me in the case of like, this isn't something I want to be doing. I don't want to come home and complain. And I would see a lot of their complaints were mainly to do with people that were above them. And to me, that meant that I would have to go to entrepreneurship. So I didn't have a boss, even though realizing now that even if you have a company and you have a board and stuff, you have bosses, but it's a totally different way of having a boss. But that kind of stuck with me first off, just knowing that, okay, like if I want to do anything, I need to do something for myself. And it looks like that's the best way to not complain about my life and have a good life. So that was a big thing to me. And that kind of stuck with me. And then as time went, I kind of just did little things here and there, but never really until I got into BCIT. BCIT was when I first kind of made the leap and first really tried something new. And that was in between my first year at the school and my second year, and that was doing digital marketing for like little places in Maple Ridge and Langley. And I learned that from our mutual friend Austin Town, just doing his digital marketing and helping him out a bit just to learn the ropes and do really basic digital marketing in that aspect, especially in real estate at the time. And so I learned a little bit from that, and I was able to take that, and instead of going straight to working a co-op in my first summer in between school years, I was in the entrepreneurship part of the school. So I was like, well, why don't I just try and do something by myself instead of taking a job, which at the time seemed weird because everyone else was taking jobs even in my sets. And so I still did it, and I didn't take a job. And instead, the first week, I kind of just went knocking doors, and I went out and, what I kind of gamified it too, because I know that there's always like a growth strategy to everything. You can gamify anything if you really want to find it. And so what I would do is I would just go on Indeed and try and find people that were looking for a digital marketer. And then when I got the interview, I would just say, hey, I have this. Why don't I do this for you instead?
Mm-hmm.
And so that was my first trying to figure out, okay, how can you change the game? How can you do things differently than also just walking up and knocking on doors and businesses? So my first week was lucky enough to get my first client. It was a CrossFit gym in Langley, and I was actually getting paid $700 a month to do their digital marketing, which was a lot of fun. And that included doing their ad spend as well for them. And lucky enough, by the end of the summer, we were able to turn $500 of ad spend into $10,000 of annual revenue based off of memberships that came in and free memberships that came in. And so it was really cool to do that during my first summer. And then it continued on until December, until I was, obviously you guys know from time at school that, I was in 8 different courses and I just couldn't do both at the same time. And there's no way I would be able to give my clients the respect that they're supposed to be getting for me paying for them paying me to do their stuff while me being in school. So I decided just to focus on school during that time after. But that was my first real taste of like, okay, what's it like to go knock on doors? What's it like to go and talk to people with having no brand, no nothing, and to really just bring a service and say, hey, you want to pay for this service, and realize like that is possible, that you don't need to just go and work somewhere for it to work, that you can actually just take that in and do it yourself if you just make sure that you have the right skills.
Yep.
And so after that, I started doing tech, and which is something that I've loved since I was a kid. I was a kid that watched Apple keynotes in grade 8. And so that was a lot of fun doing that. So my first venture into tech, which then helped me get into where I'm in now, was doing Airbnb, but for parking for college students. So I helped a lot of BCIT students actually pay 50% less for parking by just parking across the street in the residential area, where you usually get a ticket if you were there for longer than 2 hours. And so I actually saved, I think it was about I can't remember what the prices were, but it was like $2 for an entire day of parking in these spots instead of the $5, I believe, a day at BCIT. And so I was actually saving the parking. I was doing that, and then COVID hit, which then led to where I'm in now, which brought up the idea of Treno, which is basically, obviously now it's it's a mobile marketplace for youth athletes to connect with pro athletes as well as pro coaches. And so what we're doing there is basically it would just be a youth athlete coming onto the application and finding a pro athlete. Like, for example, in hockey, we have guys like Michael Del Giudice. We have tons of AHL players. We have ECHL players. And we have WHL and OHL players coming on as well at a lower price because it is a marketplace. So some people like Michael Del Giudice, I believe, is about $200 per request. So basically, a kid would come on, find a Michael Del Giudice. They would send 3 different things. They send what they are looking for feedback on within their sport. They send what their goals are within the sport. And then lastly, they send a maximum of 3 minutes of game film or practice film or film that they have a friend take of them for anything that they want help on. They then just shoot that off to, let's say in this case, Michael Del Giudice, who and then will just respond to the request with a selfie video, really personalized, really something that kid is looking for that they otherwise never be able to get. And then they get that back and they're able to either get better at their sport, or also from the vanity side of things, they're able to also put that on social media. Only the first 15 seconds of the video. Obviously, since personalized feedback, we don't want kids thinking that they can take that feedback for themselves. And yeah, so that's basically where we're at. I know I kind of jumped all over the place there, but that's kind of the journey for where I'm at now and how I got there. And you know, at the end of the day, it's, you know, you go through random things when you're trying to find what you want to be doing, and I'm glad to be where I'm at now.
Wicked, man. I appreciate you sharing the story. I had a couple questions that stemmed out of it. First one being, you know, you talked about your parents coming home. And you know, pretty much what it sounds like, just being miserable. What did your parents think about you getting into entrepreneurship as opposed to going the regular career route, climb a corporate ladder, you know, do a 9 to 5, have consistent cash flow coming in? What did your parents think of that? Just out of curiosity.
I think being the younger child, I was always given the leeway, just the nonchalant, you know, young child that they don't really care about as much. So they didn't really worry too much about me. But I think what they did was they went the route that they didn't get from their parents, which is that in like to my face, they said, you know, go for it. This is super cool. They are interested in everything that I'm doing. They ask questions about it. They want to understand it a bit more. I know that they don't fully understand it at the end of the day. Like the idea that you could like make money this way and be living this way, they don't fully understand it. They could look at you and be like, you're doing really nothing. But I think in the back end, they kind of like worry and stuff like that. But that's how they've kind of been able to handle and push on me, even from when I was a younger kid, which was, you know, I was always never really, I did a lot of different jobs when I was a kid just to kind of understand what I like to do. Like my first job was working on a lumber mill at 4 a.m. Saturdays and Sundays. And I quickly learned there that, you know, doing construction isn't for me. You know, I think my parents kind of realized that I was going to be someone that figured out over time what I wanted to do, and that working a job isn't for me. But I think secretly in the back end, they were kind of worried, and still probably are kind of worried about where that direction could go, because it is totally different from what is safe and secure, which is a normal salary and working a job. So I think my parents went about it really cool. I think I've never thought to tell my parents something and be worried about what they think. I think they've always been really pushed on me to do what I want to do in my life. I think because they kind of realized that they didn't get to do what they want to do. So I think I got it good. I think I definitely got it. I know a lot of people don't have it that way. I think parents like to put on a lot on their kids. So yeah.
Absolutely. No, we're the same way. Our parents want us to go the regular route by all means, but, you know, over time, getting into the field, showing what we're capable of doing, you know, how much income we can actually bring in being self-employed and being entrepreneurs kind of changes their perspective, which kind of stems me to my next question. You know, you're talking about gaining experience, learning skills, essentially, that could be later relevant to things that you're doing, especially in entrepreneurship. And you talked about,
going to a lumber mill, and you develop the fact that you don't like to do hands-on stuff, but you also talked about, learning the fundamental skills of digital marketing and being able to sell that. What are some core components and skills would you say are necessary to maybe build up before going into entrepreneurship or in business for yourself?
Oh man, that's a great question. For myself, I think that like it's almost like things you can't always like you kind of learn outside of like, skill set. Because at the end of the day, like everything you go into, like for example, like what you guys do, like there's a certain skill set that you need to do that I will probably never have in the ways of like within the industry. But when it comes to just a skill set outside of that, that every I think entrepreneur has at the end of the day is that you really know how to work hard and understand that you need to be working at all times to kind of get to where you want to get. And outside of that too, I think I was speaking to somebody. It's a great question because I've never really thought about that before in terms of skill set. I guess if you're thinking like even like sales skills, which I think every entrepreneur at the end of the day has to have because you need to interpret, you have to show someone what you're thinking and what you're about to grow because even at the beginning days, it's nothing. So I think at the end of the day, sales skills and understanding how to show what you're doing and pitch something to somebody and actually work through something with someone to show value from a product is really at the end of the day, like for us, like being in a tech company from the beginning days, you're talking like we were talking to investors about something that didn't even exist yet. So it was all just sales. It was all just telling a story and showing this stuff. So I think at the key concept, if you don't have that, I think I saw a stat and it was like either 60% of entrepreneurs or 40% come from sales. So if that doesn't show that sales is a key component of it, whether you know it to like being you don't need to know it to being like a top level salesperson, but you need to know it enough to be able to talk to somebody and be, less of an introvert for a second, just to talk about what you're building. So I would say sales at the end of the day is probably the biggest.
I agree. I personally think that sales is in a way very direct, but also broad. With sales comes developing communication skills. With sales comes developing relationships and being able to manage relationships, and all of those kind of stem into business. I totally agree. With sales, customer and relationship management, when we come to hiring a team and managing that team, if you know how to talk, you can do realistically anything. So I totally agree with that. I don't know if you had anything to add there, Eric, but I have one more question that kind of stemmed from your initial story. When it comes to identifying opportunity and ideas, you identified two wicked opportunities. One being solving a problem and essentially cutting 50% of parking costs for broke students, and then two, essentially creating a marketplace so that younger people can be impacted by professionals at the end of the day. How do you go about in terms of finding these things? Is it just like kind of a spark? Do you stumble across them? Like, walk us through that process. If there is one.
I think as you were talking, I was already forming in my head, like it really is at the end of the day, like things that you just kind of stumble upon. I think like when you look back, it's like, sorry? Oh, can you hear me guys okay?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Good.
Okay, cool. I think you do have to stumble upon it at the end of the day. I think that for me, I was stumbling upon it because I put myself in these positions that I could stumble upon it. Like with the parking at Trova, it was because I was in the position where I didn't want to pay for parking. And I hate paying for parking, period. I typically try and find places that are free for parking, or I just don't pay and I just hope I don't get a ticket. So there's already this underlying factor that I hate paying for parking because it's a nuisance. But I learned it because I was like in this space where I would drive to VCIT, I would park away from the school because I didn't want to pay for parking. But then when I was driving, I was realizing that like, why can't I would just drive by one day? I was just driving. It was after driving a bunch of times. I was just like, why wouldn't someone just rent out their parking space to me for cheaper than it would be to pay there? And then I'm more comfortable because I could get a ticket here. But if I pay less, then I'm paying less, and I have a appreciative factor to that. So I'm probably more willing to pay for that. So it really was stumbling upon it, but being lucky in a way that, it was lucky because I put myself in a position of being lucky in that sense. And when it comes to Treno, like it really does stem from the same factor that I played high level sports when I was a kid. Like I played high level lacrosse. So me stumbling upon the idea was because I could already see where that could, the beneficial factor of the service could be. And then it sparks enough idea in my head to then go figure out, do people want this? Because at the end of the day, like anyone can have an idea, but if you don't have the initiative to go and figure out, do people want this? That's what I tell like anybody is like, if they're coming up, it's like, you need to like go figure out, is like, is this actually a problem? So if you are lucky enough to stumble upon something like even if you take like Jeff Bezos and take Amazon, like he essentially stumbled upon Amazon, that he was in the right position where he was working at a venture capital or a hedge fund, and he knew about trends, he knew about things going on, and he could see that books were going to be bought on e-commerce. And so he was in the right position to do it. So there is a big factor that you are supposed to be in the right position. So that being said, it's like, but then you have the enough initiative to go out and do something about it and figure out, okay, do the masses want this, or is there enough people that want this? Which obviously in his factor, since I did, in our factor, we only saw positive results after doing surveys, and which I was like already equipped to do from my schooling and from the experience that I have to make sure that I go do a survey. And there's a great book that if somebody wanted to read to learn if somebody wanted some people wanted something right away, and it's called Talking to Humans. If someone's trying to build something from a business standpoint, it's the best book to read about, okay, can I actually measure, is this something that people want and build? So definitely from being in the right position, but also making sure I execute on it to then go do something about it and see if people want.
What's that book called? Sorry, you were talking a little too fast.
It's called it's called Talking to Humans.
Talking to Humans, yeah.
It's a great book.
No, definitely surveying, polling, focus groups, so important when you're pre-idea, right? Otherwise you're just jumping into the brine. What Brian and I do is very, very different, but we always rely on data. Like if we can't make a decision based off of data, it makes your risk. It makes your investment much more risky than it needs to be, right? If you can back things up, it will allow you to have as much peace of mind as possible. But at the end of the day, entrepreneurship is all about risk. And a lot of the time, this risk that we talk about is very high reward, but there's also a very, very high risk that it could go south, right? Which takes me into kind of my next question. I'd love to learn a little bit more about some of the challenges you had early on, other than the fact, obviously, that, you were pitching an idea to people, to investors, so on and so forth. As you continue to grow, what are some of those challenges you experience with Treno today? Because, I see Treno being like one of the next big things. Early on that you had to, hop over as an obstacle, but didn't stop you ultimately.
Yeah. So first off, when you were saying that piece before, it's really just taking a guess into an educated guess at the end of the day and still having a risk. But so when it comes to your question, really, well, the biggest thing is I had this idea for a tech company, but I don't know anything about coding. I don't know anything about building a tech company. I don't know anything about that. So that was like the biggest thing. I'm sitting here with this great idea in my head that I had already taken to market research before, because I didn't even want to bother thinking about the technology side, which if anyone's building a tech company, don't even bother thinking about that until you actually make sure that people might want this, and you can't do it without tech already. So that was my biggest problem. I was sitting in my room. I remember I was sitting in my room, literally just trying to scour through LinkedIn or scour through networks that I know to find someone that might be able to help me with this, whether they want to be a co-founder or want to be someone that we outsource the work and do something in that forecast. But really, to me, I wanted to find a co-founder because I think that's way more powerful to have, especially in a tech company, and to be able to help out in the long term. So really the first big problem was building out the tech. So it was to overcome that. It was just going and trying to find as many people that I think were qualified enough and to sit down and talk with about what we're doing and see if they fit in right with it. And after, I think I interviewed with like 10 or 15 different people to then find Matt, who's my co-founder now. And it's been a perfect relationship since. And it was really finding out that he was Team BC basketball and ended up loving what we're doing here at Treno and had the same thought about something like it in the past. And he, lucky enough, has been into coding and went to boot camps and and learned all about it from his time at UBC. So he's a perfect fit. And culturally a perfect fit too. Me and him never get into fights, which is great. I'm sure as time gets more stressful that we probably will get into a little bit more fights, but that's all good. But that was the big, yeah, that was the biggest problem to start. And then from there, we run into struggles all the time. I think you guys can obviously relate, like as you guys figure things out until it is something that can just operate without your guys's input at all, or you want to build a company that you can just sit back and it just the gears go without you having to do anything. So as we're building it was really just one thing after another. The first thing was building out the technology and making sure that athletes really liked it. So it was the initiative of going out and being able to the athletes and see what they liked about it and learning from them. This day, we're always talking with athletes and seeing how they like it. And we're talking with youth athletes and seeing how they like it as well. So it was really building out that tech, seeing how athletes liked it. Is this an MVP or a minimal viable product? And to be able to take that then, which we were lucky enough, and I would say we're lucky enough because it honestly was luck at the end of the day that we ran into 2 angel investors that wanted to put the initial $100,000 into building out the entire company from the sort of ground floor and before anything was even made and before our first dollars even in the company. So we were able to then take our product to the next level. That was a much better product and we're able to outsource some of the work as well and take the ease off our backs while we're building it. So the money problem never kind of ran in, which we were lucky enough to get into. But on the other side, it's really just building out the technology and also on the side, hiring the right people for the company. That's one big problem we're running into now is we're going to be hiring 4 new employees that are going to be really the first ground level employees into the company. And we don't want to be hiring someone that we're going to have to fire in a month. We want to hire people that are going to be around for a little bit. So now we're running into this issue after building out the tech and really getting something going, which tech is always going to be an issue. But now we're running into this issue of like, okay, now we're hiring people. How do we hire people? Because I've never hired 4 people at one time. So I need to figure out, okay, how do I hire the right people? How do you make sure they're good people? And how do I utilize like advisors into the business? How do I utilize my network to make sure that I understand better how to hire people? So those are like 2 major problems that we're running into and we're running into currently. So
absolutely. You kind of answered your question there, but I'd like to kind of ask it still anyways. Hiring, this is a new problem for you as an entrepreneur. Entrepreneurs, they jump off a cliff and they figure out how to build a plane on the way down, right? You're in a scenario like that right now. You don't know how to hire, but what are your steps in terms of helping you develop that skill in terms of hiring, right? Because like you said, you want to be hiring and firing within 1 month, because at the end of the day, that's probably going to cost you even more money than just hiring the right person on the front end. So what's your process in terms of finding solutions to problems as an entrepreneur?
Yeah, so I do a bunch of different things. I probably do a lot of things subconsciously, but I'm very much an operations type guy at the end of the day. So I like to make like a to-do list, and I like to think through as much critical thinking. As one big, probably the biggest piece of advice I've ever gotten in my life was to just literally just try and critically think about everything that I'm doing. So when it comes to hiring, it's just critically thinking about, okay, what's the best people to hire? Okay, let's figure out who and what positions those are and what is most vital for the business right now and where do we want to put our money. Second is also figuring out, okay, how do we not use our own money and how do we utilize grant money in Canada to pay for those jobs so we don't even have to pay for them? And second, how do we make sure those people that we're going to hire fit into that? And then it's also then, okay, how do we hire the right people? Well, that's getting feedback from people that have been in the same situation recently and have been able to accomplish that. So reaching out to friends like, I'm friends with them, and I'm sure you guys are familiar with the company Vitae Apparel. I know Celine there, and I reached out to her, who's been able to apparently really hire some great people there, and it seems to have been working great. So I reached out to her. I reached out to obviously our mutual friend Ethan as well to see how his hiring went down and how they've been able to accomplish that. and really just put myself in a position where, okay, maybe I don't need to start where they started, which was maybe ground zero, where they had no idea what they were doing, and put myself in a better position where I've gotten my foot ahead of the door, where I don't need to make the same mistakes that they made. So really just trying to find some mentorship in it, and ask people for feedback. And that's one big thing, is like being open to getting feedback. So doing that in concert with just figuring out, okay, how do we make sure that we're not using our own money to pay for these employees, and how do we hire the right positions, and then just sending out and trying to interview with as many people as possible, even before we're going to hire for that position. So months before we're actually needing somebody, just making sure we're always meeting with new people, and maybe we'll come across somebody that is outstanding and we need to keep following up with them to even hire them. Because at the end of the day, we want some outstanding people to come in. So lots of different things, and lots of different things to have to keep under control and go and do. But like you said, building a plane on the way down, it's just trying to figure out as many legs as you can kind of attach and put yourself under you, so you're able to land a little bit easier on the other side, but still know that you might,
mitigate the risk as much as possible.
You might end up not in the best position. Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely. No, you brought up a good point as well around, like, reaching out to your network, talking to people, the way that I see that, and you brought it up as well, but you mentioned the word mentorship, and the importance of that. I'd love to learn a little more about your take on mentorship. If you have had any mentors in the past, and how, if you have had mentors, if that's helped you. But yeah, your overall take, and why you think that's important in succeeding in business, entrepreneurship. And well, first and foremost, have you had a mentor before?
Yeah. So
Okay.
I've had my first mentor, like by the definition of like mentor, would be David Saint Laurent, from Western Media Group. I love that guy. I still text him to this day. I've known him since 2018, I want to say. He's great. He owns a business that's more so just like a lifestyle business. They do great. Like, it's outdoor advertising, and they've done advertising like Subway and stuff like that. So he's built up a great business there. And to meet with him and talk with him was really my first take on, like, okay, you can build a legit business. Like, this is for real. Like, you can make millions, and it could be, something that's just a lifestyle. Maybe you only want to make $200,000 a year, but you can work for yourself in that way too. You don't need to build a $1 billion business to be working for yourself. You can build something small and it just be just as good, if that's what you want to do. So he was my first real mentor. He was my first guy to really, learn about the life of business and entrepreneurship, and as well what he gave me this piece of feedback. I think it's like 20, either like 20 things he wished he knew before. And the biggest one that stood out to me, and I still remember to this day out of all of them, is that you need to find like some sort of restaurant that's your restaurant, where everyone knows you. But when you take people there, they don't know that you know everyone there. So you just look super cool, being so cool with everyone. And that was like the biggest thing that stood out to me. And I still try and think to this day, because like our office, which like I still work from home and I can work from anywhere, but our office is right by like the Joey's or something downtown on the Bentall Center. And I still think to this day, I'm just like, should I make that my spot? Like, is that the spot that I need? Like, I actively think about it. So it was like one of the biggest things that stood out for me from him. But yeah, he was my first real mentor. And other than that, like I have people that I have a network to go for feedback. Like I said, like I love getting feedback from anyone. I love texting people randomly to get their thoughts on things. And I'm not afraid to reach out and ask a question to see what people think, which I think is like, you always need to humble yourself, and you don't need to act like you know the answer to everything. And I love to do that, especially when it comes to learning things about the business, because I don't know everything. And some things I do let myself fail at, and some things I know that I can go and learn from somebody else. So that, there's other people like I've had, who was it? It was the owner of Advisor Websites was my first real tech mentor, who I still text to this day, who I reach out to about anything. So yeah, I'm definitely really about mentors in the capacity that you should be looking for guidance and feedback. And they might not be mentors, but even your network that can give you feedback can be just as good as a mentor sometimes as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. Couldn't have said it better. I think mentorship, the way that I always look at it as well, like I've spent so much money on mentors as well, not just like people that do it for free, but also paid mentors. And I think the value in it is that you're always going to get a positive ROI out of it. And not a lot of people see it. They look short-sighted and they're like, well, and I don't want to spend 20, 30 grand to get a mentor for 6 months. Well, you're paying for the results at the end of the day. You're paying for somebody to get you from point A to point B simply based off of the fact that they've done it before, right? You can fail a lot. And I think,
No, of course. I mean,
as an audience that is young and that is listening to this, that's probably one of the biggest pieces of advice I can give you. You can fail a lot. And what will happen if you start failing, if you can push through that, hell yeah, good on you. But there is times where you're going to get discouraged. And if you don't have anybody to lean on or somebody that can guide you out of that, it can be pretty discouraging. And that's where entrepreneurship can get really, really tough at the end of the day. So.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, I was a big Gary Vee junkie back in like 2017, 2018. But I think like the one thing that I can add on to what you're saying is just like he does what is it? I think it's like the 4Ds or something. It's like 10 grand to go and meet with him and talk to him about questions that you have about business and stuff. And it's like, if this guy who prides himself on not taking people's money and everything, and he's doing that, obviously there is some sort of like, there's a capacity to have mentorship, and it's obviously going to propel you somewhere because someone has the answer to thing. I mean, my company is based on getting like mentorship in a certain type of way. It might be quick feedback, but it's like the idea is like I'm looking at it like that. You can get a piece of feedback that might propel you. Like I've had moments where, yeah, I've had moments where I've talked to people for like 2 minutes and there's just like that one thing that they said that can change everything. So I'm trying to make sure that kids can have access to that, and it kind of goes along exactly like what you guys are saying.
Yeah. No, it's the same thing. Like, for example, reading a book, like my goal with every single book is to get one thing out of it. That's it. That's all you need out of a book to actually, use and be useful, or have that book be useful. And yeah, like I think a lot of people think that reading a book, you got to take 100 different strategies out of it. No, if you can find one thing that's going to work, or take one thing that's going to work, then that's a successful read right there. You don't need to be brainwashed with all of the 100 different things that are fillers. Maybe you try 10 different things that you learn, but if you can find one thing to stick to, then that's a big win.
For sure.
I'd like to, Taylor, I'd like to go in a little bit more about Treno, because I think it's a very unique opportunity that I'd love our audience to really tap into as well. So, Treno, first of all, you mentioned that Treno was kind of like a work-off or a spin-off of something similar with like famous people. What is that called again? Where you can like
Cameo.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah. So
yep.
I like how you've migrated, and I even love it even more because you're targeting the younger demographic, and that's what we're trying to do as well. Give them experience, get mentorship. I love how you said that as well. The fact that they're getting mentorship and they're learning from people that have been in their footsteps and have been and made it to the professional level. But I'm curious, these guys are professionals. They're playing in high level leagues. You have people from the NHL and other like top level, top tier professional leagues across multiple different sports. What is your approach in terms of attracting those guys and actually being able to sell them within and coming on as a mentor?
Yeah. So obviously when you have bigger guys like Malik Beasley from the NBA, we got Michael Dozal from NHL. We have some top WNBA players, which the names are escaping me right now. But we have a lot of top players, and we also have some middle, not middle level players. I would say they're just below, and the fact that they're still at this super high level that you can only dream to get to. I know kids that are my age, or my friend Adam DeRoche, which I know you guys know as well. Like he played at this insanely high level of hockey that you could only dream to even get to there. So you can only imagine these guys that make it to even just a lower level pro, like AHL, EHL, like all these guys are overseas and everything like that. So really at the end of the day, with the lower level athletes that don't make as much money, because the pay gap is insane, to go from, even just like a lower level NBA player, which is like a bench player that's making maybe, $400,000, $500,000 a year, which is nothing in the NBA compared to someone else that's just 10 seats over from them on the starting lineup, making 30 million is insane. You don't make as much money, especially with the amount of money that you have to think that these guys are putting onto their bodies. So at the end of the day, even if you're a lower level NBA player, you're not making that much money. So the one thing to go after and make sure that we connect with a lot of these, coaches and mentors is that they are able to make more money off of this, which is coincided so well with what they're doing, just on the court, on the ice, whatever they're doing for their sport, that they can make money doing this as well and connecting with youth athletes, which only helps their brand. So a lot of it's just direct messaging. A lot of these guys, it's simple as that. It's just coming back to the days of just reaching out and getting in front of these people. So we direct message a lot of these athletes. We do have a full-time employee right now that reaches out to them on a daily basis. So it's just through that, which is simple enough. You think there's some sort of other way, but really at the end of the day, we do that, and we have a referral program as well within the application that allows for them to make even from that. Every athlete at the end of the day probably plays with another athlete, so it only really helps us and helps them at the end of the day to make more money within the application. And when it comes to the bigger and higher level athletes, it's about speaking to their agents and reaching out to them, because a lot of these athletes are hard to reach out to unless we have a personal relationship with them. And a lot of some of these guys, we definitely do have personal relationships, and especially as we grow and make them money, that the personal relationships will only grow, hopefully. So when it comes to high level athletes like Malik Beasley or the Michael Del Giudice, which actually we spoke to Michael Del Giudice personally. It was the most hilarious conversation I've ever had. He was in Miami, and if you watch his video on Treno, he's in Miami at the time, which is hilarious. And he told me how he was hanging out with this, like, I can't remember the name of the DJ, but it's pretty much one of the most famous DJs. And he's just like slyly telling me this stuff. And I'm like, this is going way over my head right now. And so some people like that we get to speak to directly, but some people we speak to their agents, and we kind of coincide them coming onto the application where they can make money as well as connect with them and grow their brand, with also marketing efforts, which only helps us grow, and actually directly speak to people who are going to come and use the app. Because if you think about it, Malik Beasley's following or Michael Del Giudice's following is going to include a lot of youth athletes and guys that are on the come up. So we utilize them for marketing as well, and we utilize everyone on the app for marketing at the end of the day. But these bigger guys, we work in marketing campaigns with what you see with anything like Cameo. There's not a single ad that Cameo's ever put out that doesn't have one of their most famous people on the application. I've only ever seen guys like Ice Cube or The Game,
Snoop Dogg.
Or I watch a lot of sports, so I feel like, yeah, Snoop Dogg, which I'm pretty sure is invested into the company, so they use him probably for free, if not anything. That's what you got to do. It attracts the most people to the application, and we'll utilize the same guys to the application. But that's sort of how we do things right now.
Absolutely. I love it, man. I think that entrepreneurship, especially your opportunity, provides so much opportunity. As in, you get connected with some of the most crazy, richest, most talented people in the world. You're changing the lives of now younger individuals that potentially could see themselves as professionals, and you get to enjoy the ride while still making good money and getting your name out there as well. Like, I can't thank entrepreneurship enough for myself and Eric. Like, we've been exposed to so many different people. Like, we were at a house party the other weekend, first house party in so long, and it was a mansion. And collectively, could you not, like, all these people that were there were worth over $1 billion, which was epic to think, because back when I was in school or back when I was working a corporate job, I never would have thought I had an opportunity to be networking with these next level individuals. So it's crazy what business can do. Hey.
Yeah, no, it's crazy even talking to our investors too. Like, without like naming who they are, obviously I don't think they will want to name who they are, but we were speaking to one of them, and he just dropped how he was going to his house in Vegas, and he was charging a tip for himself. And me and my partner, what the heck? Like, we're on a phone with the guy literally telling us how he's charging his own just to go down to his house because he wanted to get out of the country for a bit. And it's really cool to see. It's like sometimes you got to step back and be like, how did I even get here? I mean, there's always that quote. I think it's from like Chris Rock or something. Or I think it's Chris Rock or someone where he just like he always keeps a bag by his door because he knows it might be all taken away at some point. Because it's always still surreal at the end of the day. You always kind of think that you shouldn't be there, but you have to kind of figure out that you are supposed to be there. But totally. Yeah, no, it's really cool. It's really cool to hear that for you guys too.
Absolutely. Cool, man. Well, I was just
gonna. Okay, this happens a lot. Yeah, man. I mean, this has been a good conversation.
That's
the twin thing.
The way we always finish off the podcast is,
Yeah.
looking back at your younger self. I think there's some lagging going on, but yeah, looking back at your younger self, what's one piece of advice you would tell little Taylor that's just getting into entrepreneurship, or to somebody that is wanting to get started entrepreneurship? What's one piece of advice you wish you had when you started?
Yeah. So I really think it's just I think the most beneficial thing for me over the years was working a bunch of different jobs when I was a kid and learning like what I liked and what I didn't like, and kind of cultivating to understand like, okay, this is going to help me put myself on a better path. So I'm not some, 35-year-old not knowing what I want to do with the rest of my life still. So if I was a kid and I wanted to do my own thing at some point, I would go and work different jobs. I would go try different things, whether even if that's working a job or maybe that's trying different business ideas, to see what I like and what I don't like. And then to learn from those things, to look back and say, okay, did I like the sales part of this? Did I like the operations part? Did I like this industry, but I didn't like that part of the industry, or I didn't like sales and I'd be better in operations. So I think if I was a kid, if I was going back to my younger self, it would definitely be to continue and take what I liked and what I disliked about things and understand myself a bit better, and to be able to propel myself to what I will excel in and love every day working in.
Cool, man.
Absolutely.
Yeah, great advice. Great advice. All right, man. Well, hey, it was great chatting with you. Good reconnecting. I know it's been a while since we last chatted, but yeah, man, I'm excited for what your future beholds, and we'll definitely need to link up because I'm definitely interested in how things are going with Treno.
Yeah, it was great talking with you guys and catching back up.
Yeah, bro. Cool.
Cool, man.